live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. I'm accompanied by our good friend and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you? Good night, evening.
Yeah, evening. Come on.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to dig into this next round of the playoff. We've got 4 great games. We have no BS this year. There's not going to be any situations where, we have to talk about Boise State playing Penn State, and we don't have to talk about Arizona State ended up giving a pretty good fight to Texas, but that game.
Texas played down to their competition and up to their competition every week.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we got 4 great matchups. We got 4 really, really good matchups.
I mean, they were in a dogfight with Vandy. They were in a dogfight with Arizona State, and you know who else they were in a dogfight with? Ohio State, the national champion. They gave them the best run for their money. So even then, I'm with you there. But we do got a lot that we need to discuss and a lot that we're going to talk about here. We break down the quarterfinals. There's Alabama and Indiana in the Rose Bowl, Georgia and Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, Oregon and Texas Tech face off as well, and we got Ohio State and Miami. By the way, Oregon's got more travel than anybody in human history. They would have to go to Miami, to Atlanta, and back to Miami if they win all of these games. They might as well stay on the East Coast.
That's insane.
Maybe
they should. What?
Well, it'd be 2 weeks in between. You're not going to say 2 weeks on the East Coast. But here's an idea. Why don't you make games like Oregon and seed things where they would also be on the West Coast of things? Or I got a better idea. How about this? Why are you sending Oregon all the way to Atlanta? I got a better idea. Why, instead of sending Georgia to the Fiesta Bowl, why don't you send them to the Chick-fil-A Bowl? I mean, it's just like, what are we doing here?
Well, from my understanding, don't the teams based on their seedings get to pick which bowl game they're going to? So I would assume that Texas Tech had last choice, but it's to their advantage that Oregon has to travel all the way to the East Coast to play this game. So they're the 5 seed. They don't really get the priority in this situation. While I agree that logistically it makes the most sense, they, in a way, need to be given a bit of a disadvantage because they don't get to choose.
Very true. This is all very, very much chaotic to me. All right. We got quarterfinal games that we got to break down here. But before we get to all of those, some of our good friends over at FanDuel. Download the FD Sportsbook app today. Use your mobile device to do it. I'm still mad at A&M for blowing my parlay that would have made me $175. I could have paid for more Christmas presents, but that's neither here nor there. But go over to our good friends over at FanDuel. Download the app. Place your bets. We got quarterfinals. We got playoffs in the NFL. What a game last night. What a last couple of games, even Thursday night football in the NFL. You could have bet on that. Absolutely amazing stuff with our partners and friends over at FanDuel. Any thoughts, questions, concerns, go over to FanDuel.com/RG for more details. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so already, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button down below. We greatly appreciate you doing that. Wherever you listen to podcasts, do us a favor too. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, let's break down these quarterfinal games here. Georgia takes on Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. As the Georgia Bulldogs had another situation where they had a bye week, but they face off against a common opponent and a team that they've already seen earlier this season in the Ole Miss Rebels. When you look at Georgia and Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, what are your thoughts?
Like, I think the first thing, knowing back to this original matchup when they played one another in October, a lot has changed for both these teams, obviously. But the changes that have happened favor Georgia in this matchup. There should be a lot of belief in Georgia coming into this game as 6.5-point favorites over on FanDuel. You have, as we talked about in the recap of the Tulane game, they're without Lane Kiffin. Not having Lane Kiffin, how much does that hurt you? How much does it change your capability to prepare, in-game management, all of those things? But Blake, aside from the coaching stuff, I'm really focused on the fact that the last time that these teams played, Georgia had 0 pass rush. We're not talking about a bad pass rush, a weak pass rush, 0 pass rush. And since then, right, in this final month, they have now found, and we keep talking about this and the importance of what this means for Georgia's trajectory for the rest of the playoff field, they are now a relentless front seven. They are a group that has figured out how to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And they've done it successfully against some guys that are pretty mobile, that navigate the pocket pretty well. they were able to produce sacks against Ty Simpson, despite Ty Simpson having a pretty good, pocket awareness. You can say what you want about Ty Simpson, but he's shown some pretty significant grit hanging in the pocket, evading pressure. Blake, now that they can do that, how differently does this game go? Trinidad Chambliss is a really elusive quarterback. He is one of the hardest players to wrangle. If you can get 2-3 sacks in this game, what is the separation? How many points is that worth? There's a couple other things that we're going to get into here, but that has to be the one thing that's at the forefront of my mind looking at this matchup.
Want to know where Ole Miss is without Lane Kiffin? This is a game that you tested at. Now, before I get to Georgia, I just want to say this. We brought this up last night, and I'm really intrigued to see how this all plays out. Joe, every member besides Garrison, the offensive line coach, all of the offensive staff is in Baton Rouge with Lane. Every one of them. We have Ole Miss people posting and coaches saying interim wide receivers coach and first game as a winner as an interim wide receivers coach. I don't know what to make of Ole Miss's offensive staff. Who's going to call plays? Is this a Colin Klein level situation? I don't think Charlie Weiss will do that. But I look back at this game, and I went and rewatched this game earlier this morning as I'm sitting there in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, clanging and banging. And I'm sitting there just kind of rewatching the game. And what was the thing that Ole Miss did that Georgia has fixed? You talked about sending pressure in the pass rush. That's not it for me. What really was significant to me is how a lot of those young 5-star DBs were able to just go in man coverage and lock things down to give Schumann and to give this defense a lot of confidence to be able to send more pressure than what they had been doing. I look at this situation and say, this is where I see the turmoil for Ole Miss, if there is any. I think where Ole Miss is going through things, Georgia is ascending. And I look at a team that needs to get healthy in Georgia. Do you get Drew Bobo back? Do you get some of the guys that have been nicked up back? Ernest Green's been battling through a lot of things. But I look at a unit who runs the football highly effectively. And that is the biggest mismatch for Ole Miss. Now, there's one lie about Ole Miss that I think's been told all year. Joe, they're top 35 in the country in total defense. Everybody, they're bad, they're horrible. Someone commented on our post last night. There's something about all of this that every team in the quarterfinals, every team besides Ole Miss, has a total defense that is top 15. Think about that for just a moment. Besides Ole Miss. But, Joe, they're 33rd. Their secondary has been very good. They've done a lot of things and creative things in their back end. It's their run defense, which has still plagued them. And you talked about in the recap last night that Tulane was still able to find gashes and runs and explosive runs against Ole Miss, which is where I just think this game's won and lost. I think Trinidad Chambliss is the most overlooked quarterback in the country. A lot of people are like, oh, the D2 guy. Well, Joe, they ran for 4 touchdowns in the red zone on Georgia. We talked about in the first game, you were like, Blake, they couldn't run the ball. And you were right from a statistical analysis standpoint. Yes, from a down in, down out, they had some issues. But I go back in the red zone, and I'm like, they scored 5 touchdowns, 5 straight touchdowns. And when they got in the red zone, Joe, they lined it up and said, Georgia, come take it. And we're going to take it from you. This team is still very talented. Now, I don't know from a coaching perspective what all is going to happen. But both running games are the key to this one. And I just feel like Georgia has such the much massive hand here to be able to prevail. I also want to bring this up. This was also the Gunnar Stockton coming out party because he had to really put this team on his back with Lucky and company and throw them into a win. They ran the football effectively, but he had 5 total touchdowns. And I think of like when Larry Bird got announced into the Hall of Fame, stay with me. And you have these people like, I was listening to the Indiana State game, and all of a sudden, all I keep hearing is Bird, Bird, Bird. And like, this brother can play. You go back and rewatch the game, and the only thing I keep hearing during the game as I'm working out this morning is Gunnar Stockton this, Gunnar Stockton that. And so I go back and really start focusing in on the game, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This was the real game that Gunnar Stockton put this team on his back and led them to winning the SEC.
I think that this game is going to be another battle of quarterbacks because you're right. This was like a really intriguing duel between Chambliss and Stockton. But you brought up where I think Georgia has the edge, and then inversely where Ole Miss has to step up. They're 132nd in EPA per rush allowed. That is out of 136 qualifying teams. They're also a team that doesn't generate a lot of havoc plays. So tackles for loss, turnovers, 126th in that regard defensively. They just don't do it. So this is what it's going to mean against the Georgia offense, that when they're matched up with teams that they can really take advantage of, especially teams with poor run defenses, when they get into their rhythm and they're getting their full head of steam and they're running the ball, it allows Gunnar Stockton to play more freely. Plain and simple, if there's a quarterback this upcoming round that has to play damn near perfect and an offense that has to play damn near perfect, it's Chambliss and it's the Ole Miss offense. They cannot leave points off the board. They have to finish drives. They can't have turnovers because their defense, this is a really bad spot for them. Anyone wants to disagree with me on that? The last time they played, that occurred. Chambliss was extremely on point, and they still lost the game. Mm-hmm. I don't think that Ole Miss is going to be able to generate the stops that they need to and able to pull this thing out. It's going to come down to, do you get the one stop that you need, and can Chambliss score off of it? If you get a turnover, can you get points off of turnovers? That is going to be the margin here for Ole Miss to advance. And that's why I have confidence in Georgia, because there's just not as much to buy into for this Ole Miss squad. It was a great thing for your program and your brand to say, hey, we won a playoff game at home. But I think that now you're stepping into a challenge that you're not supposed to survive.
You know, I think a lot of people are going to be talking about motivation for Georgia in this game to some extent. And I look at a team that their season ended in the Sugar Bowl last year versus Notre Dame. I don't know how to say this, but I think of Kirby Smart in this one. Mm-hmm. Losing your dad, the terrorist attack, everything that accompanied. And I saw a team last week, or 2 weeks ago, that finally wrote their wrongs against Alabama. Same thing happened with Alabama and against Oklahoma. I just think that this one's going to be a downhill fist fight. I still think Trinidad Chambliss and Kawan Lacey, if healthy, are going to be able to do some things on Georgia. I don't think you ultimately stop them. They're still really good on offense. But I don't know from the offensive staff how things are gonna go. I don't. I just think that Georgia's massive advantage here is in that run game, as you mentioned, and I think that they take it to them. I think they understand what happened to them last year in the Sugar Bowl, and they're trying to right that wrong. Did you see the clips of Kirby Smart, by the way, yelling at his offense?
Oh, when somebody was in the parking lot and you could hear him screaming in the
parking lot.
That made me so happy.
And he's yelling at Gunnar Stockton. He goes, "Oh, he throws a touchdown pass in the SEC championship game, and he thinks he's a pretty boy." And I'm just like, man, I don't think people understand what this train that's coming in Georgia. Yeah. The one thing that I'd point out too about Ole Miss that would worry me: third down offense. I think that Georgia, the way that they won it last time, them getting off the field 4 straight times is going to be a big deal. And they're going to heat up Trinidad Chambliss, and let's see how it goes. But look, you said on FanDuel at 6.5, I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm going to take Georgia to cover. I just think they're too much, and they're on a track to face off against Ohio State and make it to a national title.
That's the first pick that I think the rest of these I legitimately need to sit on. I want to see what the line movement is.
Right.
But if I were to place a bet today, I am taking Georgia -6.5.
I am too. And I think that line's going to get bigger once people start realizing what's going on with this offensive staff. And listen,
Right.
Joe, I said this just a moment ago on AYS. I got to give Charlie Weiss a lot of credit. And I think Pete Golden said the right thing. Hey, man, everybody was pointing at Charlie Weiss. I mean, Lane Kiffin gave him over play calling, and Pete Golden understood bringing him back for that playoff game what it meant. How is that going to transpire? I have absolutely no clue. So we'll see.
Yep.
All right, hey, we got some breaking news here. Per On3, Biff Poggi has interviewed for the vacant Michigan job multiple times. He has announced. He has told Michigan, I know what the hell I'm doing. I know that I'm kind of throwing this out there to you, but you brought up Biff Poggi as being the next head coach of Michigan, and he is announcing right now that he has interviewed for the Michigan head coaching job multiple times here per On3. I know I'm kind of throwing this off guard to you. Thoughts on Biff Poggi potentially interviewing and being a part of this Michigan coaching search? I know you brought it up multiple times.
Yeah, the Michigan stuff, we almost talked about it yesterday because the Kalen DeBoer situation of DeBoer winning, I think, completely shut that situation down. It was never anything that was going to come to fruition, except Michigan fans were awfully optimistic that they could pull him away. Kenny Dillingham signs his extension despite having to panhandle for money, which is one of the most insane things that he thinks somebody's just going to hand him a check, which is absolutely absurd behavior.
Poggi tried. Good for trying.
Here's the thing, Blake, and this is the really harsh reality for Michigan. I think most of your big players are probably going to leave regardless of who you bring in.
I agree.
I do not think, and Dan Wetzel reported this this weekend, saying that he doesn't expect this process to be done anytime soon. If that's the case and the portal opens on January 2nd and guys start to leave, and even if you don't lose Bryce Underwood, if you lose everybody else, a bunch of key players, just 4 or 5 key guys that were starters last year, young up-and-comers, whatever it is going to set you back for this upcoming year. To believe that whoever you hired, unless it was Nick freaking Saban, was going to keep everybody locked in and stuck to the team, I think is a bit naive. Blake, they're going to have to reset. And I said this and I brought it up somewhat jokingly, but because of the timeline of when you fired Sharon Moore after all these other jobs were opened, making Biff the interim might be your only option. Unless you turn to somebody that was...
You can't make him an interim.
But you can't give him like a full... Maybe give him one... What I'm saying here is forget the title. 1 year of Biff. Because if you force something and you hire somebody that is a total, absolute, just consolation pick because there's no options left, that sets you off for a much worse trajectory for the next 10 years than giving Biff the job. You go 7-5, 6-6, whatever disappointing record you have, and then you get the chance to be the premier brand next cycle. I don't think there's going to be any real like crazy big job openings like this year. There's just no way that we go back-to-back years, Blake, of gigantic openings of this scale. It's just highly, highly unlikely unless something catastrophic happens. You would be the biggest opening, and you'd be able to pick the top candidate. It might be the best route.
I'm trying to think of jobs that would be open. It's not many in the SEC.
Wait, I'm going to just quickly pull through the maybe Clemson and Florida State. In the Big Ten, nobody really in the Big Ten, most likely, that's unless Lincoln Riley leaves or is fired, and we don't think this is going to happen, Dan Lanning leaves to go to the NFL or something like that. South Carolina is not a bigger job than Michigan if Beamer gets fired. If Tennessee does poorly, maybe, but Michigan's still a bigger brand than that, and I don't think that Heupel's going anywhere. The only job that would be on par with them is Florida State.
And I don't think that's on par. I think it's Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go sidebar here because I know there's a lot being brought up about Marcus Freeman. as it sits right now, you're right. Here's what I'm hearing. I'm going to circle back through this. Michigan fans are really mad at me. I get it. Everyone's looking at your job and saying that you have massive dysfunction. That everyone looks at you and says, yeah, I'm not so sure that the NCAA is not going to get back involved in this. What happens with Matt Weiss and what happens now with Sharon Moore? Do I even have a sitting athletic director? And who is Biff Poggi meeting with? Because it's not I don't think it's going to be Ward Manuel. I really don't, because Ward Manuel is under investigation right now. I agree with you. If Biff wants to take it, give him. Who was the guy Mississippi State who took over after Leach? God bless it.
Zach Arnett.
Do it to that kind of situation, right? I just don't think Michigan fans fully understand where they're at the current moment. And that, look, man, you got a full-blown rebuild. Here was always the truth, and I'll keep saying this. You should have ripped the Harbaugh Band-Aid off completely. Instead of letting it linger, you got infected.
Well, but they were in the same position at the same timing. If Harbaugh left and you cleared house,
you had to rip everything out.
But who were they going to hire at the time? They would have been in the same exact spot as they are right now. They would have been after the national championship in the middle. But in the middle of they're Michigan right now, and they can't hire anyone.
Yeah, but you would have been able to be in a better situation, and Sharon Moore's situation wouldn't have been there.
I honestly think they probably looked at the Sharon situation similar to the way that they looked at Biff.
Be nervous about firing somebody and ripping the Band-Aid off. It was because you won a national title and you didn't think that you could move on from everything. And Harbaugh's telling you that you better hire Sharon Moore. What they failed to realize was that the function was still infected. The place was still infected. Joe, let me bring this. Do you remember the Florida documentary with Urban Meyer? And they were winning. But my God, look how bad it was internally. And then it ultimately failed. People got to learn from mistakes. Just because you're winning doesn't mean that you can't rip the Band-Aid completely off. So, look, we weren't planning on doing this. If I don't disagree with the whole Biff Poggi thing. But the worst thing that can happen is he starts having massive amounts of success with his cutoff T-shirt.
Can I just want to – that's a good – I hope that he goes cutoff T-shirt when it's like 20 degrees out. I want to reiterate one name and then throw out a new name.
Okay.
Manny Diaz. If you're not going to go with Biff,
I don't think Manny wants.
I think Manny's a good coach, though, and I think that he would fit there, and I think that he would shock a lot of people. I think with how competitive that they could be quickly. Here's one that I haven't heard brought up. We just did this with Kalen DeBoer. Why aren't we doing this with Brent Venables? Like, seriously, he just got them to a playoff.
Because
you think you can pull him away from Bama? Why wouldn't you think you can't go and get Brent Venables?
You're not pulling away a hometown dude that wants to be at Oklahoma.
Is Venables a?
I mean, he's in Oklahoma. I mean, he's there for a long time.
Well, he's from Kansas.
I mean, I get that, but he was at Oklahoma with Stoops, and then he waited for this exact job. I think he wants to stay there. And why would he leave for Michigan with all the dysfunction? I mean, why would he leave for Michigan with all the dysfunction?
Well, they were talking about firing him at the beginning of the year.
Well,
they didn't give him any grace in the SEC. They were the fan base was talking about getting rid of him.
Yeah, but the fan base also thought at Alabama that they should move on for Saban because he couldn't make it to a playoff in the NIL era. Then he made it to a playoff. Fans are fans.
I know. I'm just saying that Venables, if you think you can pull away Kalen DeBoer, why wouldn't you pick up the phone for
Because it's easier to pull away DeBoer than it is to pull away Venables, in my opinion. By the way, if this goes into the new year, I mean – They still think that
it's Biff time. If you get the January 2nd, there's no coach. It's Biff time.
I fully agree. All right, let's move on here. Sorry for having to do that. But Indiana versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl. The number 1 seed versus the number 9 seed. Joe, I saw a tweet earlier today. If you would have told me 2 years ago that Indiana would be the number 1 seed and be a favorite over Alabama, people would probably put you in a mental institution. I thought that was pretty true. But Indiana coming off of a bye and going into their first playoff game this year versus Alabama, who beats Oklahoma on the road. Now the Tide travels back to the Rose Bowl. Your thoughts on this game as you preview it?
Yeah, I think there's a very key important angle to look at this game, Blake. Indiana's a 6.5-point favorite, by the way, on FanDuel, as we're talking about here. Blake, Alabama is going to be challenged by one of the toughest front sevens that they've seen all year. And I know that might sound crazy for some SEC fans to believe that, but it's the truth. Indiana this season is 19th in defensive EPA per rush allowed, 4th in havoc rate, 25th in EPA per dropback. They're 6th in total sacks. They're 2nd and 3rd down defense. They have proven that they can take Ohio State's run game away and they can produce sacks against Ohio State's offensive line. That was their toughest matchup, and they stepped up to that challenge. Both of those areas are problems that we have identified with Alabama over the recent weeks. They have had issues running the ball, and we have said it time and time again. I don't expect anything's going to change coming into this game. You're not suddenly going to find your run game, although if you did, it would be a breaking point and it would help you win, but you're not going to suddenly find it after weeks of struggling. But where I think that they can be better and where they really need to be prepared for a challenge and they have to play their best game is their offensive line needs to protect Ty Simpson. More importantly, they need to handle stunts and pressures a lot better. Too many times when I was watching the Oklahoma-Alabama film did I see unblocked, untouched guys full speed coming at Ty Simpson, or guys that were looping around, that were getting through free space, that would contact Ty Simpson right as he was getting ready to throw. There are going to be tough instances once again. And we talked about after the Oklahoma game that Ty Simpson stepped up to the challenge more than people wanted to give him credit for. He made clutch throws while getting hit the entire game. He's got to do it again. I'm sorry, Ty. I'm sorry to put that pressure on you, man, but you got to do it again. You're going to have to do it again. Their success lives and dies off of how he handles and survives in that pressure. He's one of the most underrated guys in that regard. And if he puts out another great performance, it wouldn't shock me if we don't see him deliver a really, really, really impressive pass while he's getting blasted in the pocket that decides the game.
I don't think Alabama blinks on the Indiana front seven. Let me tell you why. You faced off against Georgia. You faced off against Missouri. You faced off against Georgia twice, I should add. You faced off against Missouri. You faced off against a really freaking good Auburn front seven who no one, they're a bad team. That Auburn front seven does not suck. I get what you're saying. However, you went up against Oklahoma twice, and in the interior of that defensive line, and I can make the argument even at edge, from an athletic talent standpoint, you've faced off against more talented teams than Indiana. I don't think that is a hot take. I look at Georgia's front seven. I look at Oklahoma's front seven with David Stone, and I look at Demonic Williams and R. Mason Thomas. I look at Missouri and what they have at edge. I look at all the teams that they faced, and like Auburn with Kendrick Folk. I don't think that they blink because they faced off against that level of adversity. However, it doesn't change the point that you just made. This is another really good front seven, a really good front seven defensively. They get after the passer. Joe, they're number one in the country in pressure rate. So you talk about that. I don't think that they blink. This isn't something that they haven't seen, is what I'm trying to say. But I think Indiana, this is why I said last night that this game intrigues me so much. Joe, who is the number one passer in the country when it comes to completion percentage against zone coverage? It's Ty Simpson. Who is the number one team in the country in running zone? Indiana. You got to mix it up. What did LSU, what did Georgia in game 2, what did Oklahoma, what did those teams do? They started sending pressure up the interior to force Ty Simpson out of the pocket so he can't step up and make throws. You got to be more consistent at getting after him through the interior. I agree with you. This is a really, really good Indiana front seven. Not debatable. What they've done all year has been elite. But I don't think Bama blinks. The biggest thing here, they can't run the ball. They cannot run the football. And so that's where, if they're going to pull off the upset, Simpson, to your point, and I agree with you there as well, that he's just going to have to go off. Does these young wide receivers who are and young players, these young freshmen, that with all due respect, did we know about Brooks? Yes. Did we know about Hall? Yes. We've known of their presence on this team. What have we not known? We didn't know that when their backs were up against the wall that they could produce when Ryan Williams couldn't. Let's rip the Ryan Williams Band-Aid right off. It was Brooks that was making the plays to end this game versus Oklahoma. So I agree with you. The interior of that offensive line's been getting bullied. Indiana, from a scheme standpoint, has got to change some things up, in my opinion, to do what's been working against Alabama. I don't think Alabama's going to be able to run the football. They haven't all year, and it's probably this game, but at some time it's going to be their downfall and end their season. But I just don't think Bama blinks. I don't think they blink in the sense of, do you think Georgia's front seven sucks? Because I look at this and say, yeah, there's more NFL guys on that side of the football in that front seven. I'm not saying, when I say that, I'm not saying Indiana stinks there at all. They have been elite again. But I think Ty Simpson, more than anybody in the country, has overcome adversity when he's needed to, and he just did it in a playoff game. The thing that will be Bama's downfall, if you can't supplement the run game, this Indiana team is going to feast on you. The last thing I'd say before kicking it back over to you, the three teams that were the most talented that Indiana faced off against, Fernando Mendoza did not throw for over 250 yards in any of those games, and he had an interception in each one of those games.
And they still won.
At some point, it might not be against Bama. At some point, this is my Miami take from last year. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. You're going to get clipped. You better.
Why do you keep doing this, Blake?
Why?
Okay. Well, all right.
Why?
Last season, Joe, take Fernando Mendoza out of it. If I told you that any quarterback in the country, take him out of it, I'm just going to label a name. Actually, I'm not talking about Fernando Mendoza for just a moment. What quarterback am I talking about? A quarterback that's faced off against three top athletic teams, and they don't have over 250 passing yards, and they're under 65% completion percentage. And they've thrown an interception in each one of those games. Okay. What quarterback am I talking about?
You're eliminating significant context,
like
because
what?
Blake, statistically, he didn't throw for 350 and 4 touchdowns and a 70% completion percentage and no interceptions in any of those games. But Blake, all of those games, and this happens in college football all the time, you have tight defensive battles between two teams with really good defenses, and the quarterback who's more clutch will help his team prevail. That is what Mendoza did in all three of those games. Blake, look, Indiana fans should be really excited that you're saying this, because the last 2 times that you've said this, he has stepped up.
No,
what have I stepping up?
Hold on. Stepping up when someone's coming down with a ridiculous catch, you stepping up and scoring 13 points is not stepping up.
Okay, but when you're playing one of the best defenses in the country against Ohio State, and you deliver 2 footballs that are extremely hard to connect on, that require ridiculous ball placement and touch, to be able to do that, and then to also have the balls to do that, is it a top 1% category of college quarterback?
I guarantee you this. You keep doing that. Keep having that same energy, and you're going to get clipped. I promise you're going to get clipped. You keep talking that mess.
Blake, you're the one who keeps bringing this up, and he keeps defying the odds. He keeps defying those odds.
Joe, he's not defying the odds. The team's defying the odds.
can you say that?
You know why?
Those throws are incredibly hard to make.
Let me tell you why. Because he kept getting the football, because his defense kept shutting down Julian Sayin, and they shut down Jeremiah Smith and Cardell Tate.
Complementary team football, but everybody has an assignment. Everybody has to make a play when they're called upon, and he's got a 100% success rate of stepping up on those plays.
And I promise you this, mark my words, if you keep doing that, you're going to lose.
But he hasn't. He hasn't. This is my problem. You keep saying
you
this.
Kept telling me last year. You kept telling me last year about Miami defensively.
It's different.
No.
It's so different.
Okay. Want to put $1,000 on it? Because you keep doing it, you're going to get clipped.
Wait. No, because here's the difference between what you're comparing. Last year, I had said that Miami could survive in games by trying to outscore them. I was wrong about that. That is a completely different circumstance.
And you can't survive throwing interceptions in critical moments, which you refuse to talk about.
I'm not refusing to talk about it. I'm acknowledging that the kid responds. Blake, wait. Here's the most important part about all of this. And Ty Simpson's great in this regard too. Ty Simpson's great in this regard too. Fernando Mendoza is the best quarterback in the country that when it comes to making a mistake, he ignores it. He moves on. A short memory is something that most college quarterbacks in a soft society that we're in these days, most of them screw up and then make more mistakes. And I'm not calling Marcel Reed soft. We just watched Marcel Reed do exactly that. We just watched him have a bad, really inaccurate throw an interception, and then proceed to throw an even worse one at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Fernando Mendoza has responded by moving on and understanding that every single play is a new moment to succeed. That is where my buy-in comes from. And that was what I was going to bring up as my final point. How well does Mendoza perform against the secondary? Because Alabama's secondary has been pretty good. It's been inconsistent in spurts. They've given up big plays. They gave up a lot of big plays to Deion Burks. They kept Sayin at bay for the most part. But do we see another situation where they bottle up Surratt, Cooper? I don't know what the injury status is with that wide receiver room. Do we get another game from Charlie Baker where he steps up and he makes numerous contested catches once again? Because I think that we learned that the receiving room that they have is deeper than we thought, and that Fernando Mendoza can be a playmaker and a clutch player when they need him to.
Everybody keeps saying that, but they forget Dante Moore's 2 interceptions to end the Oregon game. They forget about the interception that should.
They won.
They
won the game.
As a team. But when you throw an interception and Penn State's got a backup quarterback and they have no offensive pulse, at some point it's going to clip you. You mark my words. Dante Moore and Oregon lost that game the first time around because 2 interceptions were thrown when they had the lead. Or they were tied, excuse me. Same thing happened for him. If you keep throwing interceptions in critical moments, someone will clip you. I double dog dare you. To throw for less than 250, under 65% against Georgia, Ohio State again. I double dog dare you to do it, and you'll get clipped. Do it. I guarantee you'll get clipped. Joe,
you keep saying that. You keep. Okay. I don't want to keep circularly discussing this, but again, Indiana fans should be excited because the last time that you said this, he literally threw a pick, and then he had 2 clutch throws.
Every time that I have been so adamant about something, I've been right.
I don't know if that's for certain.
Miami was my biggest adamant point last year, and it landed.
Okay. All I'm saying,
TCU 3 years ago, it landed. They got blown out.
But they're not Indiana. They're not TCU. Indiana's not TCU.
Putting $1,000 down for him to win the Heisman. Who won that one? The 3 biggest things that I'm adamant about. They're gonna get clipped. You mark my words. They're gonna get clipped.
If it hadn't been playing out, here's the difference with this in Miami though. Miami was showing that it was slowly cracking and breaking, and I was stupidly still defending him. But here's the thing.
You're saying
Mendoza keeps literally doing the opposite of what you're saying. He is every time that you've said this, he has literally proven that wrong, that notion wrong.
Okay. Mark my words, they're going to get clipped. The only other thing I'd say in this game, Alabama, I don't know if they have enough from a running game standpoint that's going to be able to beat Indiana. So all that shit I just talked, I don't know. I mean, Ty Simpson's going to have to go off.
He's going to have to do everything.
I will say this. from a boundary corner standpoint, I think that they face off against Indiana better than what Ohio State did.
Ohio State's corners are not as good as people thought they were.
I agree. If you can go man like they did in the second half versus Oklahoma, well, we'll see. All right. Speaking of Ohio State, Joe, Ohio State versus Miami in a really big-time matchup. Ohio State having the first round bye. Miami going on the road to College Station and upsetting them. Your thoughts on breaking this game down?
Ohio State's a 9.5-point favorite over on FanDuel. Look, I'm going to reiterate what I brought up twice now. I do think that Ohio State's going to win this game. I think that this game is going to be much closer than the line indicates and then a lot of people want to recognize. I think that Miami is going to give Ohio State a serious fight. And it comes back down to what we saw from both of these teams in the last games that they played. Ohio State's game against Indiana. They could not get the run game going. Their offensive line was out physicaled by Indiana, a group that is not as talented. Indiana's front seven is still really good, but not as draft talented, prospect talented as the Miami group. They couldn't get things going, and Julian Sayin was pressured and sacked a ton in that game. It completely derailed a lot of their offensive success. They could not convert in short yardage because they couldn't get push on that Indiana group. It's going to be much harder against Miami. And for Miami's sake, their last game that we watched on Saturday, Ruben Bain and Mesidor and the whole front seven, Blay, they balled out. They manned the F up. Blake, here's the biggest key for this game. Can Ohio State get the ball in Bo Jackson's hands early? He averaged 4.9 yards per carry in the Big Ten championship game, and they got away from him. 17 carries in that game. He was under 100 yards because they got away from him. Get him the ball early. If you can start to establish some sort of a run game, get to the edges, get into space, don't be stubborn thinking that you can line up in this heavy personnel like you did against Indiana and outman them. Use space to your advantage and try to get a rhythm established. If Julian Sayin has to throw the ball 25 plus times in this game, you are cooked. I'm going to be that direct. This is not a good matchup for you dealing with Bain and Mesidor. We just watched Texas A&M have that degree of hubris with their good offensive line, an offensive line that is better than yours, and believed that they would be fine. And they got whooped with a more mobile quarterback. Like, they got to get their run game going. That, to me, is the most important part about this that will decide the game. If Ohio State gets a rhythm, it'll help them. If they can't, Miami could pull out the upset.
The number 6 run defense in the country versus the number 7. The question is, Joe, we just saw a situation where they couldn't really find their running game consistently enough against Indiana. And I think you've been kind of bullish on this early, but to back up your point, can you do it against a more talented front seven in Miami? Because we challenged, or you didn't really. Well, you kind of did. We challenged Ruben Bain, and he had 3 sacks. We challenged Mesidor, and he had pressures galore Saturday against a mobile quarterback, and they still were getting home, and Julian Sayin's not that. The biggest question that I have in this game is not necessarily, it's can Ohio State run the football and do it in a consistent nature? But here's the opposite side of that. Texas A&M literally did the one thing that they should have done and kept going to Mario Craver, because I look at the Louisville game when Miami got clipped. I look at the games that like SMU when SMU clipped Miami. They kept going to the number 1 receiver that kept getting them yards and catches. Can Miami stop Jeremiah Smith? They couldn't stop Craver. They couldn't stop Cristobal. They couldn't stop SMU for doing the things that they wanted to do. Now you're going to have to convince me that they can stop Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. I get it with the running game. I get it. But you better stack the box and try to double Jeremiah Smith. I mean, Corey Heatherman, who you've been massive on, they have been elite this year at not giving up points in the red zone. They have been great on third down. They're top 10 in the country on third down defense. Defense is not the problem that I have. There's a lot of questions for Julian Sayin, this Ohio State team who scored 17 points versus Texas. They scored 10 points versus Indiana, the two toughest teams that you played. Now you're going up against another very talented unit. Can you get in the 20s? That is the question that I'll have here. However, the opposite side of the football also comes to play here. Are we truly sure that Miami can run the football? Are we fully sure that Carson Beck and this wide receiver room that they can score points their damn self? I just think that Indiana showed a blueprint of how to slow down and beat Ohio State. But I don't know if Miami offensively has enough firepower outside of Malachi Toney that can get that done.
That is what should come from this, is that the Texas A&M game, their defense was really impressive, but their offense does need to do more. Plain and simple. Their run game absolutely took over, and that was like a really big talking point for us, is they really had their best performance in their most important area where, you know, Fletcher completely ran over everybody that was in his path. But they need to get more out of Beck. They need to get more out of their receiver room. You're going up against an Ohio State secondary that was weakened and had issues trying to slow down Becker and trying to completely eliminate that Indiana passing attack. Can you get big plays going with Malachi Toney? It's out there. It's on film. You need to find ways to set him up. You need CJ Daniels to make contested catches like Becker did. Like, I think that they're going to have success running the ball. Miami will, because they did it against Texas A&M. Understandably, Texas A&M's run defense we talked about was atrocious, but Indiana had 69 yards, 4.3 yards per carry from Black, and from Hemby, 52 yards and 4 yards per carry. That's a pretty good clip for your two running backs. Same type of mentality here for Miami.
The other great team you played, Texas couldn't run the ball.
Yeah. This is here, but that was the beginning of the year. But this is my biggest thing, though. You mentioned Carson Beck. Carson Beck had a solid game. He just did enough. But you can't just do enough to beat Ohio State. And this is kind of what we were just yelling about here with Fernando Mendoza a second ago. Statistically, Mendoza didn't do anything crazy in the Big Ten championship game, but he delivered in a very tight game. If you want to win, this is going to be a really, really tight ball game. Mendoza delivered in clutch, critical situations by being willing to take shots and connecting on those shots. I need to see Carson Beck make a play like that. I know I'm asking for a lot here, but when you're playing a team as good as this, you need to be able to deliver in that regard. You have to be third down, find a guy on the sideline, attack a tight window, and to set up your guy to succeed and to come up with a catch. That has to happen, because as everything else flows, Beck needs to be a driving force for them winning. He has done enough this year, and he did a better job of protecting the football than he's done in other big games where he's had turnovers. I got to see a version of him that maybe we haven't seen since he was at Georgia in order to win this game. This is how good this Ohio State defense is with that front, with all the speed that they have at linebacker and at defensive end. It is going to be a really, really tough game.
Well, you better give him short fields, and you better play field position.
Yeah.
Because to lead you down multiple times, 75, 80-plus yards, I don't know if he's going to be able to do it. Now, if you can get him in short field situations and play field position, here's the one thing that Ohio State has lacked. Joe, they're 46 in the country in red zone defense. No one wants to talk about it because they're first in total defense, they're first in passing defense, they're first in scoring defense, they're first in excuse me. Not red zone defense, red zone offense. Excuse me, I said defense.
Okay.
The reason I'm bringing up the offense, when you can limit points and give short fields, make Julian Sayin have to go the length of the field to capitalize on you. Field position is going to be a massive deal in this game to get Carson Beck moving. I don't think outside of Malachi Toney they're explosive enough to be able to attack enough. We'll see. But Ohio State is not like they have their own issues on offense too. So I think playing field position, managing the clock is going to be a big deal. I'd also just bring this up. I know we keep talking about A&M offensively and how bad they did. Joe, they also only scored 10 points. It's not like that they lit the world on fire, right? So you better be able to fix some things. That's all that I know. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Oregon versus Texas Tech, the number 4 versus number 5 seed. I think this is the one I'm most intrigued about because it's Texas Tech for real. Boy, they're mad at me. The Texas Tech fans are pretty mad at me, but I understand as to why. But Texas Tech versus Oregon. Joe, when you preview this game, how do you break it down?
Oregon's a 1.5-point favorite over Texas Tech. There's been a lot of line movement on this. Look, I'm not going to harp on some of the concerns I had from the JMU game because this is a new week. This is a new battle. You're turning the page. Dan Lanning's the type of coach that's going to be uber pissed off, and he's going to get his team locked in. Like, this is the game of the week that I'm focused on the line of scrimmage. We talked about the Texas A&M Miami game being last week. I'm looking at it this week. Both teams have really solid offensive lines. Both teams have really solid defensive lines. But where this game is specifically made or broken, Oregon O-line going up against that Texas Tech pass rush. How much time does Dante Moore have? Isaiah World specifically, who will have situations where he's going to have to go up against probably Romello Height and David Bailey. How well does he play? He was a guy coming into the year that we talked about having high expectations for. From a draft perspective, he was a guy that people thought could turn into a top 10 pick. Hasn't exactly exploded to that degree, but he's going to need to be prepared for what this battle is going to bring. It is going to be a really, really tough, hard game. He's got to give Dante more time, and the whole offensive line has to give Dante more time. The other part with this is Texas Tech has had a really, really good run defense. They're 5th in EPA per rush allowed. Understandably, I know you're probably going to bring up, haven't faced a lot of prolific rushing attacks, but when they played BYU twice, who had one of the better, actually very high quality rushing offense, they bottled them up both times, and they made them one-dimensional. Making them one-dimensional completely screwed up their offense. Oregon's rushing attack is elite. Over 216 rush yards per game is what they're averaging. They're also generating a lot of explosives on the ground as well. Are they able to lean on running the rock, and can they break through? I feel like in the first half is going to tell me a lot, Blake, out of any game. Do we see Oregon have a bunch of big plays on the ground? That's going to tell me how the game's going to finish. Do we see a bunch of big sacks from Texas Tech? That's going to tell me how this game is going to finish.
Here's the moment in time that Texas Tech fans have been waiting for. I know that Texas A&M is 5th in the country in total offense. I know they're 2nd in the country in scoring defense. I understand that they're 3rd in the country in scoring defense, number 1 in the country in rushing defense. Joe, when I look at Texas Tech, I see a lot of very talented players. Bailey, I love Terrence Carter. I love what they're doing at receiver. I love their run game from what I've seen from them versus the Big 12. The question that I have is what you did against the Big 12 and all the ways that you looked offensively against the Big 12 going to translate against a team that has just as much, if not more talent than you, like Oregon? I turn back to the first BYU game and how much they got after Charlie Morton. And I think to myself, I feel like Oregon has much better pass rush, and the interior of that defensive line is much better than what we saw from BYU in both matchups. I don't want to take anything away from Texas Tech, but when you couldn't finish drives versus BYU, now I got to see you do it against Dan Lanning in Oregon. Now I got to see you actually go out there and do it. So, yes, statistically speaking, are you top 5 in the country in total offense? Yes. Are you top 10 in the country in passing offense? Yes. Are you 2nd in the country in scoring offense? Yes. Are you number 1 in the country in run defense? Yes. Well, all of that now gets actually put to the test. You're actually facing off against an opponent that can go athlete for athlete with you and go coach for coach with you. And I think Oregon is just overall, Joe, more talented. That's what I think. Prove me wrong. And I will gladly come out here on New Year's Day and say, man, this Texas Tech team was legit. You did this versus Big 12 opponents. Now you're going up against an opponent who, by the way, is 13th in the country in rushing. Joe, they're averaging 218.4 yards per game on the ground. You talked about that the first half is going to show what this team in Texas Tech is made of. And as I said last night, and I'll say again today, I want to test them. If I'm Oregon, I am testing them. But Oregon's got a little bit of an issue themselves. They have a defense and offensive coordinator that are trying to build other programs. And how is this team going to be able to manage all of the situations with Will Stein not in that building, Tosh LaPoy not in that building? Is that going to be a massive factor for them? Everyone looks at the Oregon game and says, yeah, well, you didn't finish versus James Madison. I'm going to have to see Texas Tech, with all of the dominance that we saw them have this year, do it against a team that is just as much, if not more talented than you are. I think everything that I've seen from Texas Tech gets thrown out of the window for this one reason. Brother, this is by far the most talented team that you've seen in 2 years. What are they going to be able to do? You brought up Isaiah World yesterday. Can David Bailey get home on him? Can you get home? Now, Oregon, if there is an advantage, I don't know how much they're going to be able to separate at receiver. There are advantages for Texas Tech here. But I still think, and I'm not going to use the word fraudulent again, I still think that offensively there is something missing. There is something missing. If you're going to have struggles in running the football versus BYU, I promise you're going to have struggles running the ball versus Oregon. This is a different beast. Be David and go slay Goliath. Because if you can do that, then none of us can say anything, and you show that you're a real contender. But Oregon's been here before. They've been here before. I just think that they're going to be able to find a way to win it. That's where I sit here and say that, yes, I know what Texas Tech has done against the Big 12. Can they do it against a premier Big 10 team?
Okay, here's my thing. I don't disagree with the premise of you got to prove yourself. I don't disagree with that. I think that is a totally fair approach to talking about this. Of it's your first time here. You are wanting to establish yourself as a consistent brand, but, and I'm getting very nitpicky here with the words that you used. I don't look at Oregon as Goliath. I don't. I think that they're a beatable opponent. I know that what you're trying to say here, and I'm not trying to like spin your words, but the way that I'm just looking at this is a beatable opponent. This is not a team that significantly.
Well, David wasn't a slouch either. He literally slayed massive armies.
I know. I'm not going at the words that you used. I'm looking just at the game itself. I'm not going after what you just said. I'm just specifically looking at this matchup in the frame of nobody in general should think that Oregon is insurmountable, because I've seen flaws from this team all year long. Their pass rush has not been as potent as we expected them to be this year. They're 78th in the country in sacks. How does your offense take advantage of that? How effectively does Baron Morton capably finish off drives when they haven't been able to in their two toughest matchups? That to me is like the number one biggest thing that needs to be talked about here for Texas Tech fans. And I think they recognize that. They are able to produce big plays. They've got really underrated receivers. They've got a really good running back tandem with Williams and with Dickey. But you have to put points on the board when you get turnovers. You can't do any of this shit anymore where you don't convert and you fail on fourth down or you're kicking field goals. This is an Oregon team that knows how to control the pace of a game, that knows how to run the football, you have to step up in that regard. They are beatable, but you have to execute. Execution is going to be key.
What's wild about this, you talk about Texas Tech offensively finishing. They're 50th in the country in the red zone. Here was the crazy stat that I brought up earlier. Oregon's 124th, tied for 124th in the country in red zone defense. So something's going to give here.
Yeah.
If you're a Texas Tech fan, listen, we do this to the big boys every week. Talk about strengths and flaws. Now that you're having success and someone's pointing out your flaws, you can't get mad over it. Joe, I'm going to have to see him do it, buddy. I'm going to have to see him do it. Because at the same exact time, I also look at a situation where, look, I saw BYU do some things on you and Charlie Morton and force him into situations. Do that again. I double dog dare you. Do it again.
Barrymore, by the way, you said Charlie again.
God dang it.
You're good. You're good.
Charlie Morton's a pitcher. So
Yes.
we're getting into baseball mode. So anyway.
Be a good game.
It will be a very good game. But at the same exact moment in time, Joe, this run defense is number 1 in the country. They're giving up 68 yards on the ground. Do you really want me to come in here and sit here and say to Kansas State is the only team that ran for over 100 on them at 120, I think it was 128 or whatever it was. Buddy, this is the best team that you've seen. It's the best team that you've seen who's dominating in the running game. So if I'm Oregon, I'm going out there to test that. I know that they hate me. I love Joey McGuire. I love Texas Tech. I really do. But when you get in here with the big boys, you gotta listen to how the big boys are getting talked about. You just talked about Oregon's not insurmountable where they can't get clipped. Oh, but God forbid if you say anything bad about Texas Tech because everybody wants. Good Lord. Did you not see what happened with BYU in game 1? Do that again, and you're getting absolutely ran through. I'm sorry. You can't do that against these high-level of talented teams. Everyone's got the same amount of talent as you. Everyone's got the same amount of talent as you. They might have a little bit more. I think Dante Moore is going to go off because I see a secondary that hasn't been Joe, what's the team that's tested them through the air?
There really hasn't been.
Avery Johnson. Long hair, sunshine, Avery Johnson. Okay. All right. We'll see. All right, let's get to some super chats here before we get out of here. 318 Louisiana STTDB with a $5 super chat. Says Golden should have shut his mouth and just gave the credit to the players since he's all about that player coach stuff. Yeah, he's been taking a lot of shots at Lane.
Well, I don't blame him. He's trying to get his guys motivated, but at the same time,
he's also trying to win the press conference with the Ole Miss people.
Oh yeah, so then there's a lot of ways to. They all hate Lane Kiffin right now, so it's like take advantage of that and get everybody to support you. So he's just playing. He's politicking.
He's playing the role. I agree.
Yeah.
Alex says, "Yeah, Blake, because we got to stop 4 tight end sets in the red zone."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This has been the weird. I didn't get why against Indiana. Why are you just not throwing 50-50 balls? You've got 2 gigantic receivers.
They're trying to get too smart for the room. Did you see Gruden? Gruden's talking about this on 12 and 13 personnel. Teams don't practice base. So you're trying to outsmart the room. The problem with Indiana is that they run a lot of fucking base.
And they're smarter than the room. They're one of the best coach teams in the country.
Correct. So I don't know, Joe. I mean, do I think Brian Hartline tries to outsmart people? Tries to? Yes. Do I think that there's another situation with another coach who's Joe? He's been at South Florida. He's been in Tampa for how long? We're seeing him on social media. He's been in South Florida for 2 weeks. How much prep is he doing in South Florida?
He already just offered an Ohio State committee. He offered Jeremiah Smith's little brother, who's committed to Ohio State.
There you go. Alex says, "Tickle my pickle, Van Sickle," and I don't even know what any of this means.
Tegra Toshbala is out of the lineup. They're putting Van Sickle in, is what he's talking about. It's just an offensive line change. Thanks, Alex.
You think that stops Mesidor or Bain?
Well, seriously, yeah, you need elite play.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Trom says a $5 super chat says that's fair, Blake. Texas Tech for the W, though. It's going to be a good game. I agree. They got to show up. I think that's a fair take by a Texas Tech fan. Buddy, you're number one in run defense. I get it. Good for you. We're happy for you. I get all of that. At the same time, what's the best team that you've faced? Like, this is a different beast. Go show the world that you can take on a team that can run for 200 yards a game.
I do think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a tight game, though. I don't think that it's going to be.
I think that ultimately they separate.
Yeah.
I do. They just got too much. Brother, they have not blocked anybody on that defensive line like Washington. You know that, and I know that. Come on. Come on. TB with a $5 super chat says, don't know if you guys knew prior to the preview, but Ryan Day officially announced he's taking over play calling for the remainder of the season. Best thing that could have happened.
Hartline shouldn't be doing it with everything that's going on. I don't even know why they need him there. I would send him off.
You always need an eye in the sky, and I think Brian Hartline's a good coach. I do. And keep him there, but good for Ryan Day. I did not know that, though. I didn't hear him say that. Drum with a $5 super chat says SEC is the best conference in college football. Put some respect on Blake's name. There you go.
Well,
Drum.
we could get a Big Ten on Big Ten national championship. It's possible.
Could get an SEC on SEC matchup.
All right. Well, we'll have a little more evidence at the end of the season to address which conference is the best.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're getting a rematch. I think it's Indiana and Georgia that are inevitable path here.
Probably.
Throw for less than 250 versus Georgia. See what's going to happen to you. See y'all tomorrow. Peace.